Military maneuvers that are provocative, and they're trying to be threatened, and they're being threats for the people who are threatened already. Deliberate violence, propaganda, and heightening social outroar, financial blockage that make it harder to get food and medicine, migration even harder, and even filling in some voids of people that are leaving. This and much more is characterized by all of the actions that now we are seeing in our region. This is carried out by the U.S. Command Central. What are the objectives? They're clear. What are they trying to do? What is the nature of their attack? And what are the visible faces? The South Command and how they stop China and the Middle East. This is our program for today. We're going to see news. We're going to see more guests. And as always, we have your critical thinking. Let's start. As I said before, the news is always. The past Sunday, just before the 198th of the Carabobo battle, that was the last battle before achieving the Venezuelan independence, through a Twitter message, the opposition called the military commands to resist to the government. And they said that you have an essential role to recover peace of your country. And to these declarations, Nicolás Maduro answered in a formal venue saying that those were hypocritical messages. And they authorized him to be answered with all of the force. Then Chile and Argentina went to work with them. That same day, they presented upon the U.S. Committee of Defense a strategy for Central America and South America and the Caribbean. And this is exactly the workplace of the South Command. And they identified China and Russia as threats. Russia is a wounded bear and tried to defy the United States. And about China, they said it just has economical interest, and they want to impoverish the countries of the region. Let's listen to the interventions of Fowler, where he presented the strategy up to the Senate, and then some of the answers of the president of Venezuela. The strategy of national defense is trying to defy all of the problems that we have. China, Russia, and others are trying to give form to a work according to their interests. And they're going beyond the line of what is just a threat. There's a systematic stealing of information, cybernetic actions that are illicit. They're going beyond every line, and we're fighting against them through land, sea, air, and cyberspace. And these are information powers. And we also have to defend sovereignty, human rights. The competition is going on at world scale. And it's happening in our neighborhood, in the south. We can see it clearly in Venezuela, where the crisis of security created by Maduro has become more serious than any other threat of the region, where, according to his own words, he's trying to support, and Russia is trying to support this government. The U.S. empire that cannot understand. They try to explain what's going on. Every day, we've got cross declarations. Every day, there's somebody just speaking out and say, one day they threat us, They threat our people. They say they're going to invade us. The other day, they threat the officials of the military forces. The next day, they say that they love the military forces and that it should go. It should join the opposition and just give in. And they should give in to the U.S. military. This is what General Fowler just said. Let's go to the action. Let's see what the scope of interest of the South Command is. We have our map, and let's analyze the whole extension. So it goes from Argentina to Chile, Paraguay, Uruguay, Brazil, Peru, Ecuador, Venezuela. Going to Central America, we have Guatemala, Honduras, Nicaragua, Costa Rica, Panama, Salvador. And we also have to include all of the Caribbean islands: Barbados, Belize, Dominican Republic, St. Lucia and the Kitts, Jamaica, and all of the countries that make this platform, this continental strategic platform. That, as we've said, it's like a shield to coming into our region. All of this area is where the U.S. has traditionally worked the South Command. The military of the U.S. are carried out all through the world, especially through 9 commands. And one of them is the South Command. And how does it work? This is how we're going to see right now. Let's see our piece. U.S. Southcom. It's compiled of 1,200 militaries and civils that goes air, land, and submarines. From 1997, the General Command Center is in Miami and Florida. Their scope of work is all of Latin America, including Central America and the Caribbean. From November 2018, Craig Fowler is the chief director. Under the excuse of going through humanitarian help and drug trafficking, along with the CIA, they have intervened in dozens of occasions in countries of the continent. But additionally, they say that they're looking out for the sovereign countries of other countries. For example, the Panama Canal. It's been the responsible of installing many other military bases, like the one in Guantanamo. They also have radar, anti-narcotic radar, in many countries. Likewise, they've put a policy of training people through the School of the Americas to be able to destabilize governments. They've got a multidimensional and multinational scope. John Wadsworth, a confirmed author, he says that many times this command has pushed governments out between 1998 and 2008. They have been both direct and indirect. Indirect are the ones where the people of the countries have pushed the governments out. According to these numbers, there's one intervention every 28 months. In Le Monde Diplomatique, Juan Gabriel Tocatlian says that the South Command has transformed itself to the main communication command with the U.S. Between August of 2002, James Hill was the one who made more trips to the zone. Their premise has been every colonization of a country comes before with the presence of a military force that will allow it to have stability. In the case of Venezuela, they've tried to asphyxiate the people, to demoralize all of the community, and so they will push the government out. Who is Craig Fowler? He's trying to re-edit the Monroe Doctrine and take it to a higher level. They are belligerent forces with special collaboration of Colombia. Craig Fowler, he's originally from Pennsylvania. He graduated in the Admiral's Academy. Friend of James Mathis, who nominates him through an agreement of a cyber covenant. He has a privileged position within the Pentagon in things of internal affairs and military affairs. He's got experience leading military forces because he was at front of the USS Shiloh and USS Stetham. With the second one, he intercepted marine sanctions against Iraq. He also worked in the Persian Gulf and Afghanistan. 2005, he was in Indonesia after Sumatra was devastated by an earthquake. Among his high-profile designation, he's been part of the Pacific Command, and he's also been with Mathis through Latin America to make strategic alliances against Venezuela. He was officially put in place in Miami. Let's go to digital places. Sputnik on June 11th, he said Venezuela says that the specialist in Venezuela should not worry the government. This is what Craig Fowler said days before. Maria Zakharova, a spokeswoman of Russia, she said this is not going to alter the balance of powers, so it should not worry Venezuela. And she also highlighted that the cooperation between Russia and Venezuela is carried out according to the legislation of both countries. Let's go to Mission Truth. Numerous informs and reports support these allegations. It says, this is of July 15 of 2019. It says that in February 25th of 2016, there was a document that confirmed the conviction has grown that it's necessary to pressure street mobilizations to try to paralyze military forces that will try to maintain internal peace. This situation will grow and grow, and it will become intolerable. I continue quoting. This is a high-range program to prioritize strategic concepts. This is the decisive force and strategic ability. So I suggest you go to this report that is called Uncovering the South Command Strategy Against Venezuela. I also suggest that you go to Rodan, June 21st of this year, that gives us more information so we can divide all of the information. It says, Craig Fowler, commander of the South Command, when he's asked in an interview recently in Argentina, that was just his second visit, what was what's your opinion of dissidents in Venezuela? And he said the true invaders of Venezuela, the true destructors of the democracy, along with Maduro, were not only Russia, but also Cuba, and lately China. I think that Russia has a vision of the world, and it wants to be considered as a great power. And this is an opportunity to show it. And in the office of Marco Rubio, he says that the Russia agency, that there is forces between Colombia and Venezuela ready to start an attack. So it's Russia that is just contributing to the chaos in Venezuela. That is what I think of Russia. Let's go back to take everything that's been said in the U.S. and beyond. For that, let's go to Washington with Jorge Costoso. Lucia, the declaration of Craig Fowler fall directly into the strategy to attack Venezuela towards the upcoming next summit of the United Nations in September. What are they trying to look for in the summit? As Samuel Moncada said himself, what they're trying is to kick out Venezuela of United Nations. So they wanted to make the government of Maduro disappear. In this framework, Craig Fowler is trying to implement the doctrine, the Monroe Doctrine, America for the Americans. At that moment, what it meant is that it was necessary for foreign powers to come to our region. So what he really was trying to say is Latin America for the North Americans. What they try to do is to demonstrate that Russia and China are trying to, that are becoming a threat to the United States through their relationship with Venezuela. In this sense, if there is a regional threat, this will be presented to the United Nations in September as one of the fundamental arguments of why the President Nicolás Maduro and his government should not be recognized as the legitimate government, so they can finish up a coup d'etat that began to be implemented from the beginning of this year. Thank you, Jorge. Until next time. So, what is really revealed in this agenda? Since the South Command is the armed force of the main strategy, so we have to divide it in two parts. What we have to see the countries that support it, that support this initiative. So this is what we're going to be analyzing in the next segment. What is the relationship with the corporation? We will consult everything to our next guests. We're going to have a small pause. We'll be right back. Today we're evaluating in our critical moves What are the main objectives of the South Command, of the U.S. Southern Command, that has been the arm of the interventions of the U.S. in this region? Let's go to the data, the current data. In March last year, the commander, Craig Fowler, during a hemispheric security forum, he said that Cubans control the security forces of Venezuela, and they are the ones who invaded Venezuela. They say that the USS Comfort, that is a marine hospital boat, they said that it's necessary to have stronger ties. The Bolivian president said that this is the continuation of an invasion strategy. Even more, the U.S. Southern Commander is in charge of the training and giving provocations to the government of Venezuela, and they also were the ones who began doing the Plan Colombia. That was supposed to be just anti-trafficking command's strategy. However, it was just a way of getting the U.S. military forces in Venezuela. Immediately, let's speak with our guests from Santiago, Chile. We've got a writer, he's a journalist, he's Master of Foreign Affairs and specialized in Latin America. And from Moscow, David Gomez Rodriguez, political analyst, writer, he's Venezuelan, researcher, and he lives in Russia. Welcome, both of you. Let's start with Pablo. Are these all operations of high geopolitical content? Where are they going? Where's this strategy going? How do you see it? In fact, this U.S. Southern Command, that is one of the 10 that the U.S. has, is responsible for many plans of contingency, they speak of cooperation, of security in South America, Central America, and the Caribbean. But let's recall that this command has at least 115 years, that was first radicated in Panama and now is in Miami. And this means that the conception and the work and the area is far beyond of what we could think, that it's just contingency plan and cooperation. No, it's far beyond there, because there is a geopolitical objective, and they're precise. One, to maintain the hegemony, military hegemony in the continent, keep on having presence in the continent. Let's recall that the U.S. has 800 military points around the world, and many of which are in Latin America, in Colombia, Honduras. And they have military presence, and therefore it's vigilance, aerial, terrestrial, and all of the instrument and technology that they have. So there's the tip of the point, and what they're trying to do is to keep under surveillance the Latin American countries, even if they don't have military bases in those countries, because obviously in Venezuela we don't have any. But they are submitted to strict vigilance. And part of this can be through Brazil and with the government of Ecuador just recently. So there are political objectives. There are military objectives too. But overall, it's to keep pressure and destabilize the region, and also have some interference in internal affairs of the countries. In this case, specifically, Craig Fowler, what he's done constantly is to intervene in internal affairs of Venezuela with callings of calling to start a coup d'etat and inviting other countries to participate in this process. So it goes far beyond the vision of this U.S. Southern Command. Thank you, Pablo. Let's go with David Gomez Rodriguez from Moscow. Let's see your vision. What is the agenda of this U.S. Southern Command? Or is there any agenda, or is it just the armed force of the U.S.? Well, it's a comprehensive strategy that the U.S. has been imposing in all of the region. We shall recall the Monroe Doctrine, that is a philosophy that the U.S. maintains to have control of the entire continent. And of course, this includes South America. Now, the relationship of powers has changed from 10 years ago, when Latin America was able to change this domination. And there was an outroar of popular governments, of progressive strategies, and this generated great advances with the conscience of all Latin America. And this, of course, threatened directly the American interests over the region. And so they activated just some time ago with Donald Trump. He said that the military charter is opened on Venezuela, and it's been activated. And let's not forget the coup d'etat of 2002 against Chavez. And we were able to trace all back to the U.S. Embassy. This was a strategy of the U.S. Southern Command, and we can see that it has to do with alliance with countries like Colombia, Brazil, that they are military platforms that can be used to eventually have some interference, military interference in our country. So it's vital that we analyze the geopolitical of the U.S. is hostile. They're trying to be hostile with us, especially against the legitimate government of Maduro. And they're carrying out strategies against the economy, and they're trying to involve military sectors. And of course, they have said that they will respect the self-proclaimed president. We have also seen how they have pushed for destabilization economically and socially. So this is a comprehensive strategy. Thank you, David and Pablo. Those who are directors of this operation, they're not people of few experience. On the contrary, Mark Esper used to be Craig Fowler is the leader right now. So they're basically war veterans. That says something, doesn't it? Of course, Lucia. The close circle of Donald Trump, what he tries to do is to get all of the people who are not convenient for him. So he just keeps all of the people that think like him close to him. And he wants to push forward a war agenda. And they have said, who are the enemies of the U.S.? And there have been actions imposed against these countries. It's not casual that Craig Fowler is the face representing the U.S. against Venezuela. I want to say something that what I think something of that was brilliant of Samuel Moncada, who's the UN delegate of Venezuela. When he answered, he was answering against Fowler and Pompeo, but he was brilliant, and he spoke about all of the characters that are in like this so-called movie: good cop, bad cop, the instigator of wars between neighbors. So there are many personalities that Samuel Moncada speaks of. And at the end of the day, what he's speaking is about the use of force. So that will be implemented by the U.S. or their allies. And what they want to do is bend the sovereignty of Venezuela. So this vision of the world has been imposed in the close groups of Trump. I think they're even much more extreme than any other group that we've seen before. They don't want any dialogue. They just misinform. That are constantly lying about Venezuela. They lie about the government, and they're getting close to the self-proclaimed president, Juan Guaidó, who he himself meets with the U.S. southern government. So what they do is they use a group of traitors, if they're Venezuelans or Colombians, like the case of Iván Duque, where they use Latin American presidents like Sebastián Piñera of Chile, Juan Leonardo Hernández, and Bolsonaro in Brazil. So there is a war nucleus that goes against all of the international law, and they really don't care going over the UN Charter. And they intervene in internal affairs of other countries, but they also violate with these permanent call to instigate violence and to generate a chaos situation that would allow the U.S. They will try to make the U.S. the empire they used to be, which they are no longer, because after some years this has been worn out. These people represent interference, manipulation, disinformation, and overall a military intervention in our country. Overall, because there's differences of the U.S. institutional objectives and abroad they're more belligerent. Thank you very much for your opinions. We have to go to a pause, and then we'll connect with our next guest. But just to close with what our guest said, well, let's go to Nodal. We should try to divide our analysis in two. Then we're going to see if the dispute has an objective to contain Russia and China. That's why Fowler said when he was exposing his strategy, they say that they're trying to dispute our traditional domains. We're going to be walking towards that. Let's have a necessary pause. We'll be right back. We're speaking about the objectives of the U.S. Southern Command and the dispute. If anything, they're trying to contain the threat of Russia and China. Let's go to more information. Venezuela is not only the attack objective of the U.S. To analyze the attack of Washington on this country, we should see the context of the U.S. dispute of Russia and China for the control of the region. This was clearly stated in a strategy signed by Donald Trump. This document also says that there is a great presence of these two countries in Latin America and the Caribbean. David Goldfried also called the government to pay more attention to these two countries. Rex Tillerson also alarmed about the growing presence of Russia and China in Latin America. So they have made with Argentina, Brazil, Ecuador, Salvador, Panama, and Honduras, they have made the military ties even stronger. The balance, according to Fowler, the balance is negative for the U.S. because it is a threat for the Washington consensus. They also speak of Hezbollah as something that could destabilize the region. And there is a Lebanese branch in Brazil. I would like to present Fernando Rivero. He's a philosopher, lawyer. Thank you very much for the invitation. At the end, the U.S. doing everything because they try to defend what they think is their traditional zone of influence? Yes. Let's recall that the tradition of the U.S. is to have control over our region. This is through the Monroe Doctrine. And there's another one that's made by John Sullivan that says that the territory of the U.S. is not only in their borders, but towards the Caribbean. And this would be taking over all of the territories south to the Rio Bravo. So there's a plan, a hegemonic plan that was made on a continental strategy. And then, of course, they want to go all the way around the world. Well, I think that the first thing that we must say is that in the 90s there was a strategy designed for Latin America where they were trying to take control of the whole world. And for that, they thought that the whole world was like a theater of operation. And then later, with the doctrine of the preventive war and the situation of Iraq, they set as an axis of the strategy the fight against terrorism. But just in 2018, the person in charge of the finances in Washington has reformulated the strategic planning and says that now the main objective of the U.S. to have control over the other countries is the fight for energy. And then we saw another paper that was a defense paper of the Pentagon that they mentioned Russia, China, Iran as their main contenders. And there is where the relationship with Latin America, with these aforementioned countries, generate these worries for the U.S. Undoubtedly now they have, from the operational and tactic point of view, they are already working in a military control over the Amazon basin. They want to control the reserves of the natural resources, for example, Ecuador, Peru, and Venezuela certainly, and they've got the reservoirs of hydrocarbons. Of course, Venezuela has the biggest reservoirs. So they've designed a military strategy against the progressive governments, especially Nicaragua, Cuba, Venezuela, and that's why the military bases are in not only Colombia, but around these countries. So that's why we see the effort they did with the Bogota government in not only placing the 7 military bases, but also adhering Venezuela to NATO. This, of course, goes into a negotiation that on one part they want to throw out the experience of Venezuela, and in the fight for their world supremacy and take over and defeat China and Russia. They are working in all of the fronts, like with China. They've already started a financial war with Russia. They don't only dispute spaces in Europe and the Middle East, but also they've also tried to impose puppet governments in places that were traditionally influence of Moscow, like Ukraine. Just recently, the war of Ukraine and Russia was supported by the U.S. They have a combination of many factors: financial, economic, diplomatic, and that too is applied against Venezuela. They want to avoid a military intervention. All this in terms of public opinion. And the growing use of the psychological war upon our country. And what they try to do is that they try to avoid that the public opinion defend their people. The South Command also has a relationship of the great corporations that are basically American. Let's not forget that there's lots of lobbying going on. The lobbying for the oil fields and for the financial aspect, but that they're trying to control the places where the decisions are being made. So what we could say is that the U.S. Southern Command, they're part of a geostrategic effort that is pushed by the elites, by the corporations of the world, that are obviously next to the U.S. government. With the new appointments, for example, with this new Admiral, Craig Fowler, can you say that there's been a change of a focus in the strategy, or it's just a continuity of the predecessor? And from the point of view, do you think that there is going to elevate the relationship with belligerent neighbors? I think that from 2015, there was a before and after. What I mean is that of the Russia participation in the Syrian war, here Russia marked a before and after because their military participation, of course, was in favor of the U.S. interests. Now, in this new situation, when Donald Trump is not in the presidency, and once they've retaken the Monroe Doctrine, they think they need the control of Latin America and the Caribbean. And of course, that goes through cutting any type of ties with the emerging powers. Because of course, what they're looking for, they're appealing towards international law, and they just don't see that they are the ones who are violating the international laws of the United Nations. Now, what has been determined is, with the new commander of the U.S. Southern Command, is to just carry on all of the strategy of economic security, to secure all the governments towards them. And of course, they establish relationship according to them, in this speech of creating a multipolar government in the world. Let's also speak that with China and Russia, who are the contenders, the original document, say that they have suffered as a consequence against the fight against drugs. They say that there has been a military stop because they don't want to go against China or Russia because they know the size of their military power. But if they could, they would want to weaken these governments and try to weaken this government. However, in those countries, they do apply a war of that is, on the contrary, is traditional. And what they do is they go around the international rights. And in the second place, there's a biopolitical control, and they use violence. They use human sensations, the elemental facts, so they could use their military influence. So this would be fundamental today in the military force of this country. Let's see, behind this financial blockade against countries like Cuba and Venezuela, the Southern Command is present. Yes, the U.S. Military forces are the mechanism by which they impose by force their interest. There is no economic blockade possible if we didn't have the military arm. So now, for example, if they did not have this supremacy with the dollar, they would not have this type of power. This is a very well thought of strategy that has had a development all through the 20th century. However, the world has changed, and we are very far away of what happened with the falling of with the USSR. And now there's a new dynamic, a new social dynamic. And therefore, they are going to feel obligated to maintain their hegemony. Thank you very much, Fernando, for your minutes. So let's go to final ideas of the space. South Command of the U.S. Mechanism for intervention, coerciveness. This is proven throughout our story. It's a long date back where the U.S. has this ambition to have to invade, to go over the Southern America, Central America, and the Caribbean. So, of course, their actions have great content of geostrategic strategy. The central point now is Venezuela. And this is how it has strengthened a violatory movement of which the U.S. is the leader, along with other countries of the neighborhood that answer to his interests. Of course, they will take the Monroe Doctrine into account. So it's important to open your eyes, because it's in the U.S. interest to avoid any military intervention. Of course, they don't want a confrontation with Russia and China. So even as the documents say that there is a declared war explicitly, and they know what the objectives are, we're going to keep on analyzing. Thank you for being with us in Critical Moves. See you tomorrow.